Antler Australia as an associate partner. So I lead the portfolio function, which means that everything after we make an investment, I hold the relationship with the portfolio companies and support them from that earliest stage through to early growth. I am a PhD in biomedical engineering by training, though I have never actually practiced biomedical engineering with that degree. I pretty quickly found my way over to the business side of science and engineering. And I've been working in deep tech and emerging tech commercialization and investment for all of my career. And so what I wanted to talk to you about today was a VC-backed startup as a career pathway. Given the program that you're all participating in, you would likely be coming at this from a deep tech angle, and deep tech is near and dear to my heart. And thankfully, deep tech is really starting to have its heyday. No longer can you just look at a company as a pure play SaaS. There is always going to be these days some kind of deep smarts behind it. Whether it's the AI and the algorithms that are powering companies like Uber and the logistics management, to Amazon Key, and then hardware companies as well. The pervasiveness of technology is everywhere, and it is table stakes these days. And I love talking with early stage entrepreneurs and people that want to be on an entrepreneurial pathway about how to move towards joining, putting your career on this pathway, whether it's founding your own startup, whether it's joining an early stage startup at this time, at the earliest stages, or even coming into venture capital. And so today I'll focus mostly on the pathway of starting your own startup, but I'm also happy to, in Q&A, talk about some of those other pathway options as well. So a bit about Antler. We are a early stage VC fund, and we invest in companies at the earliest stage. We cut the earliest checks and we follow on in our companies. So we see a huge swath of what's happening in the ecosystem here in Australia. Antler is a global VC fund. It's one of the few VC funds in Australia that is truly global. We have 14 locations around the world, with lots more coming on each year. And so now I just wanted to go through a couple of the examples. Now, not all of these are Antler portfolio companies. Zalient is one, but I'll also cover a couple that have been in previous portfolios and previous roles as well. So Zalient, some of you might have heard of Zalient given the area that you play in, but to use all of the jargony keywords that I can come up with at once to describe Zalient, they are using a bio-inspired AI algorithm that does extreme edge, ultra flyweight deployment of computer vision algorithms. And so what that means in lay terms, though you probably did understand what I said, is that they can do different kinds of computer vision processing with very little battery powered draw. And when this opportunity got started, Shivi was a PhD student at RMIT. And this was part of his PhD research. And it kind of always sat in the back of his brain, niggling away, wanting to do something with it, but didn't quite know how to get started on it. Left his PhD, went and took a job in industry, but never really stopped thinking about this algorithm, and decided eventually that he wanted to try to commercialize it. So he came to Antler to raise funds to get started. And one of the types of support that Antler provides is helping people find a co-founder. And one of the common challenges for academic originated startups is you might have deep technical and domain expertise, but often there's that commercial gap of somebody that has built a business in this space before. And so Shivy met up with Lars, who had exited 3 businesses prior, so knows how to go about building from 0 to 1 and 1 to 10, as we say in the industry. So those kind of really early growth stages. And now they've set up this really fascinating business where they're embedding their algorithms on chips as they come off of manufacture. They're working with some of the largest chip manufacturers. So in a pretty short period of time, less than 2 years, they've gone from idea to actually seeing this technology rolled out commercially. Another one that I wanted to highlight is Opum Technologies. So
before you move on, can I just quickly ask, the pair before, did Shivy meet Lars during the program or before that?
During the program. So Antler has 2 investment pathways. One is for existing businesses, so teams that have already formed. That's a really standard investment pathway. And then we have another pathway for people that have an idea, or that maybe they don't quite have an idea, but they're really smart and they've got a lot of skills and they want to meet other people that have ideas and see if they can find some chemistry to work together. So Shivy came into that melting pot. And so we smashed people together for 12 weeks, and I call it facilitated serendipity. We don't say A plus B, you have to work together and form teams that way. We just create a lot of opportunities for people to work together in interesting and different ways to get to know each other. And we have a lot of structures for how to kind of evaluate, like self-evaluate and test the relationship and make sure that it is for the long haul. I mean, there is no such thing as an overnight success in startup. Just because it's the first time you've heard of the startup company, usually in the vast majority of cases, it means that somebody has been working on this as their life's passion for at least the last 5 and usually the last 10 years. Some of you may have recently become aware of Noom, the big like diet app that's just kind of come storming onto the scene. It's not storming onto the scene. They founded 10 years ago. They've only just found product market fit and really pushed with the resources to kind of become front and center to everybody. And so that's a very, very typical journey. But yeah, they came in and found each other through that program. Most investors will not invest in solo founders. And most investors will not invest in a team that doesn't kind of represent the full breadth of skills that you need to have to build the business over that next term. And so what the view that Antler took was that actually there's a whole lot of really interesting people and really interesting businesses that need help being birthed. And so we can help people found these companies at a stage earlier than they're able to attract that kind of support otherwise. Has a super high failure rate. We know that. Like I was just talking to one of our companies the other day that has decided to throw in the towel, which is fair enough. And their comment was, it sounds like you've had this conversation before. And it's like, yeah, like they were very nervous that we were going to be upset. And it's like we went into this investment knowing that the chance of failure was really, really high. And you tried a bunch of things and it didn't work. Like that happens. Like, no, we're not upset. Like we kind of planned on that happening. And so now the process is how to help you wind it up and move on to your next thing. And if you come up with another startup idea, like the way that you've handled this attempt at it was really, really good. So if you have another idea and you want to talk about investment, come back and talk to us. because we know that things fail, and actually statistics say that you're probably going to have 2 to 3 failed attempts before you have your first startup that succeeds. And by failed attempts, I don't necessarily mean completely went down in flames, but just didn't really achieve much as a result.
Awesome. Thanks.
Zalient is we list them as one of our top 5 in our portfolio as likely to be this kind of outsized success. But hey, the glue could still come completely unstuck on this. There's still so much risk and so much time involved from now to where they're going, but one that we're watching with keen eyes. Opum was another interesting company. So this is not an Antler company, but when I first met Andrew, he was a associate professor at a university, and he had been working on his smart knee brace. And as an investor, if I get pitched a smart knee brace, like, okay, yeah, another smart knee brace, that is every single master's student project at every single biomedical engineering degree around the globe today. So why on earth would I invest in a smart knee brace in 2019, which was when I think the first check went into Opum? And it was because he had figured out how to link this technology to the clinical workflows in a way that was actually quite clever. And rather than just throwing more data at clinicians, it was helping them make more money, which clinicians like, while reducing their recut rate. So reducing having to go back and do more surgery because the first one didn't quite work right. So particularly in orthopedic surgery space, they're very sensitive to reviews. It's a quite competitive nature, and a lot of people, particularly semi-professional and professional athletes, will strongly shop around for their surgeon. And so reviews are really important. So it dealt with both reputational risk as well as top line. And he had accidentally developed some intellectual property that enabled the kind of business model piece. But that was an interesting process of where, when I started looking into it and I started poking and prodding on what he'd actually built, we kind of got to the end and it's like, well, that's awesome. You've built this thing over here, but the actual nugget of what's truly unique in what you've done over here is different and not covered by your IP. And so he ended up going and filing an additional patent as a result of that process. So it can be quite useful to talk to investors even early on in the process and get that kind of feedback about where the commercial value is. Just because you have a patent does not make that patent commercially useful. And there's a million reasons why you could have a patent that isn't all that useful in a commercial sense. But you want to make sure that you're creating defensibility around that commercial value. And that's where the gap was. And once that was closed off, it was actually quite a compelling investment proposition. And so that's one of the reasons why we invested into Andrew. Plus, he was just so determined and what we call in the industry gritty. If you haven't read Angela Duckworth's book called Grit, I highly recommend it. It's a really interesting description of how passion and perseverance come together to form the trait of grit. And we really look for that in an entrepreneur. Foundry Lab is another example of taking a early stage idea and molding it into something commercial. So when I first met David, he was maybe 3-4 years outside of having completed his industrial design degree. He had set up an industrial design consultancy, and that was going quite well. It was him plus one employee that he'd hired to help him run that consultancy. he was really frustrated. And this is one of the things that I want to encourage you. Anytime that you're doing research or trying to build something and you keep running up against a wall, that wall is opportunity. And this is the exact example of that wall being opportunity. He was really frustrated that when he was designing products for his clients, getting the metal parts fabricated was slow, it was expensive, and it just didn't suit. So, for example, one of his clients was developing a new LED downlight. And because it's a building material, it came under building material regulations. And so to go through the certification process and be able to sell this new lighting fixture, the testing that was going to be done had to be done on a prototype that was manufactured in the same way that it would be manufactured at scale. And because at scale it would be manufactured via casting, they had to cast the prototype. Now, I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with physical product manufacturing in that sense, particularly with metal. But making molds for metal casting is like not cheap. The cheapest you could get away with it is like maybe 15 grand. But if you're doing something that has high tolerances or complex shapes, you can easily get into the 100K plus range to do your molds. Now, let's say that we go ahead and invest 100K into those molds and then it fails the test. And I've got to go back and do it again. And then that one fails and do it again. And pretty soon you've spent $500,000 and you still don't have an approved product. And so he was just so frustrated that you could not cast metal quickly or cost effectively in, in short run, so small volume. So he literally set up a foundry in his garage and started playing around with ways to quickly and cheaply cast metal using 3D printed molds. And there's a whole host of reasons why that's difficult to do. But when I first met David and he showed me what he'd been doing with 3D printing these molds that were kind of semi-permanent and reusable, I pushed back on him and I said, yeah, but you're still tied to the foundry. Like, I still have to get a foundry to print these and cast into them. I want you to give me hands-free metal casting that I can put on a desktop just like you can do with 3D printing these days. And he's like, wait, well, I didn't invent that. I don't know how to do what you just asked me to do. Like, I don't know. Well, you go figure it out. When you figured it out, I'll invest in you. And so he went away, came back maybe 2 months later with pages and pages of maths and was like, I've figured it out, but I need your money to prove it. And so off the back of just literally a stack of maths, we invested in him to go and prove it. And he is pioneering digital metal casting, which is the first in the world of its kind. He's now got a couple of $1 billion US VC funds behind him, and he's off to the races. So it was from that nugget of frustration of what was broken in the industry. And when he first started, like, in other investors that I was talking to try to get them to come in and invest alongside me are like, are you kidding me? Like, metal casting is one of the oldest technologies in the world. There is no way that he's going to get intellectual property. There's no way he's going to get a patent in this space. It's just an absolute thicket of prior art, and it's just impossible. But it wasn't. It absolutely wasn't impossible. And now he's got a really nice patent family around what he's doing, and he's gone out and proved it quite well. Another example is Heroes. This is
before you go on. So was he part of the Antler program as well?
No, this is from a previous investment. And he did not have a co-founder. This is one of the few examples where the founder was so compelling in his ambition and in his ability to work through problems and not take a setback as a setback, but just take it as the path and keep trudging along, that we invested in a solo founder, despite having a policy that we don't invest in solo founders.
Yeah, yeah. I see that Fiona Zhang also has her hand up.
Yeah.
Perhaps let her ask her question before we move on.
Hi, thank you. So I joined a bit late, and I heard you talk about some programs. Could you please explain what these programs are?
Yeah. So I'm a VC investor with Antler. So we're an early stage venture capital fund, and we have two programs for making investments. One is where you have a startup and you've got a little bit of proof and you have a team together, and that's a very typical investment pathway. You could go to lots of investors if what you're working on looks and feels like that. However, we also have another program where you can come to if you either have an idea or if you have skills and want to join up with other people that have ideas and join a startup company. If you are a full stack coder, you will find your way into a startup company, no problems whatsoever. Those skills are in short demand. And particularly if you have like specific, I don't know, like you guys are in energy. So if there's anybody that has done complex energy like systems coding before, please reach out to me separately, because there's a specific opportunity that I'm thinking about. But basically, if you're entrepreneurial and ambitious and want to join a startup, but you don't have an idea, that's a pathway. You can put your hand up. We do 3 cohorts a year. We're currently recruiting for our next cohort. So you just go to antler.co/apply.
Okay. And how do you spell Antler?
ANTLER, like the deer, antler.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Not sure who came up with that name. Another case study for you, heroes. So Elliot is an absolutely amazing founder. This is an example of one that it was from a lived pain point. He is a cochlear implant recipient, and he was absolutely horrified with his experience of hearing rehabilitation. Everyone seems to think that when you get your cochlear implant, you magically know how to hear. But like, yes, you can hear things, but there's a lot of things that you actually don't know what you're hearing. And he tells this amazing story of soon after he got his implants, he was out for a run. And the whole time he was running, there was a sound and he could not figure out what that sound was. And it wasn't until later he realized that he had coins in his pocket that were jingling. But he'd never heard that sound. He didn't know what that sound meant. And for people that have hearing loss or have never heard, you have to go through like neuroplasticity training to either learn or retain the ability to hear the range of sounds. And so he's gone out and built a platform to do that. And I tossed this one in as a really interesting example of another example of lived experience, and just build off of that to create an interesting company. See if I can, so Antler, we invest across a range of companies. You won't find many investors in Australia that are super niche focused. There are a few. So for example, Giant Leap is impact focused. So they want their investments to do good. Main Sequence is deep tech focused. So you need to have rich intellectual property in order to attract funding from Main Sequence. Blackbird is they're generalist, but they're going for those kind of massive vision type companies, like really transformative, disruptive businesses. And then you've got One Ventures that one arm of their fund is squarely focused on medtech, and Brandon Capital, which is focused on medtech and pharma. Other than that, everyone is fairly generalist because we have to be. Australia is not a huge market, and so when you go to talk to a generalist, that's a kind of, you have to have a special conversation if you are bringing something that is deep tech to a generalist investor. A lot of investors don't invest in, like the mantra is don't invest in what you don't understand. I don't necessarily embrace that. I invest in stuff that I don't understand all the time. And what will get me to invest in it is when I truly believe that the founder understands it. And I don't get too hung up on technical risk. I tend to expect that I specifically aim to invest in really smart people. And so if you hit a technical challenge, you're going to wave your magic engineering wand and be able to engineer your way out of it, because you're really smart people. So when you are going to have a conversation with a generalist investor, it's much more about convincing them that you know than about necessarily them needing to deeply understand it themselves. But do recognize that a lot of investors will approach it in that sense. So it has to kind of pass the grandma test. If you can explain it to your grandmother and she gets it and she's not just nodding her head to be nice to you, then you've passed the grandma test, and you can then go talk to your generalist investor. Most investors do not have PhDs. Most investors come from investment banking, accounting, legal type degree backgrounds. And so unless you're talking to one that is specifically focused on deep tech, then you need to kind of be conscious of your audience. But you can see here that Antler invests across a wide range of types of companies. Some of them are quite shallow tech. Some of them are quite complex tech. One of the things that we always look for is what's unique, what's the market failing that this opportunity is going to address. And if you can really articulate the problem, you will be miles ahead of anybody else, because so often people do not articulate the problem that they're solving well at all. That's really all I had in terms of just kind of laying some background on what a couple of VC-backed startup pathways looked like. I'm more than happy to kind of move into just a general conversation about what that career pathway looks like, what you're thinking about. If you've got ideas, open it up to questions.
Thanks, Laura. The audience, if you've got questions, feel free to unmute yourself.
So I just had a look at the Antler website and I saw that there were two programs, the pre-launch and existing business. So I'm assuming pre-launch is the one where you join someone?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So there's a couple of types of ways to kind of move from academia to the VC pathway. One is to just take your skills and go join up with other folks. And the other is to kind of package your project or research or intellectual property and take it across. If you are thinking about that pathway, there's a couple of things to really consider. One is IP ownership. Who owns it? If it's something that a lot of people have had their fingers in, and it's like multi-institutional IP, then that's really complicated. And so before you even try to start moving it out of the university system, you'll want to get clarity on that, what that looks like. Sorry, 2 seconds. Yes, you can have an apple, sweetie. Close the door. Sorry. The other is speed. So a lot of investors will be quite dubious that whether an academic originated project can move quickly enough. Startups do not operate on semester schedules, and there's a lot of ambiguity and risk and failure ahead. And so want to see that there's that kind of startup mindset and the ability to move quickly. And then the third piece that's really common, concern that investors would look at that early stage is that commercial nous. So has somebody in the team built something of value before? Do they understand this market? Do they have networks that they can tap on? And we don't always have to see a team that completely has that nailed. If they can surround themselves with the right advisors and the right investors, it can help overcome that. But it is really challenging to know what you don't know if you're trying to solve something for others, as opposed to you have kind of been in the trenches before.
Is there a reason why it's not good? So I think you were talking about the IP before. Is there a reason why it's not good if a lot of people have contributed to it?
Yeah, because you're gonna have to get IP assignments from everybody, and if any students were involved, then usually they own their own IP. It's not automatically assigned to the university. If it all has been assigned to the university, if there's multiple universities involved, then there would be some multiple stakeholders involved in any decisions on what happens with the IP. And so, since you're in that scenario, you're looking at like 18 months to get a deal done, and from an investment perspective, that's just way too slow. So having that all like tidy. One of the real interesting things about Opum was the tech transfer office, they didn't believe in what he was building. And to be fair, he had presented them with an earlier version of what he was doing, and it wasn't going to work. It was a bit crap. And they had handed back the IP. So they said, we're no longer going to support it. And so therefore we rescind all of our rights to it. And so he picked it up and maintained it. And so it was just much, much easier to do a deal because I love universities. I've worked in universities, gotten degrees from universities, but it's a lot easier to invest in stuff that doesn't involve universities.
Yeah.
Sorry, you might want to edit that out of the recording.
Oh yeah, this is being recorded, isn't it?
Yeah.
Will we be able to find this somewhere?
Yeah, if Laura is happy for us to share outside of Fleet, we can share that.
Yeah, that's fine.
So Laura, you mentioned in your second point just then that it's very slow. It doesn't you can't run around semester timetables and things like that. So would you be looking to have like a team that's already like outside of the university ready to run on with the project? Like what do you need for when you're looking for a team that's ready to move?
Yeah, so a couple of things. One is the founders need to be able to be full-time committed to the startup within a reasonable period of time. And there's always friction there with universities because like they want their IP spun out, but they also don't want to lose their talented team members, which is like kind of fair. But unless we're talking about a CSO, chief scientific officer type role, it's rarely palatable to an investor to have a founder maintain a foot in the academic camp. And that's because startups are flipping hard and they're all consuming, and we just don't want competing interests involved. We want you fully focused on building it. So like we don't like people I don't love a scenario where we're saying quit your degree and come join a startup. That's not usually a good outcome for anybody. So it's a pathway to how does this person become full-time in the business, and during that interim, what does that look like? But if you've got a proposal where a whole bunch of people are going to be part-time, that's just a non-starter for a VC pathway. And so figuring out who comes in, who is perhaps an early hire versus a co-founder, and not having too many cooks in the kitchen. So another really important thing is making sure that the founding team has a life-changing result as an outcome of success. Now, what life-changing is different for different people. For a student, being acquired and then getting $5 million hit your bank account 5 years later, that's probably life-changing. For somebody who works in industry and is on $500,000 a year with maybe $150,000, $200,000 bonus potential each year, getting $5 million after 5 years for the risk and the headache, meh. Like, why wouldn't you just keep your normal job? So what life-changing means is different for different people, and investors absolutely will look at the situation and the motivations of the different founders. And depending on how many founders there are, like I've seen like pitches where there's 6 co-founders, and each one is going to have such a minuscule amount that the type of business that you have to build to have that life-changing outcome is so big to be improbable. And so it just makes it that much harder to invest in. So really the ideal size is like somewhere between 2 and 3 co-founders.
Yeah, sure. So it's really about, being able to see the personal commitment and motivation from those individuals per se. And it's really transparent that they're actually going to put the work in.
Absolutely. And, there is a real power in having the like ambitious and hungry teams. There's also a real power in the gray hair. So where we see an interesting mix is where you've kind of got a little bit of both. You've got that hunger in the team. You've also got the experience in the team, and they kind of balance each other out. That's not to say we wouldn't invest in a team that's all gray hairs, and it's not to say we wouldn't invest in a team that's all young and ambitious. We, for a whole host of different reasons, it didn't happen, but we were in late stage due diligence on a company that was being founded by a 17-year-old. Now, he was nothing short of an amazing, intelligent individual. Like, that's on the extreme edge. Usually we like to have a little bit more life experience than that. But, there's a spectrum. Yeah.
That's really cool. I was actually thinking of another startup that was fairly recent. And I know the one academic that I think is in there is a chief science officer. So,
yeah.
You hit the spot on when I was thinking about it.
Yep.
And another question I had, I'm just forgetting it right now. Have you ever regretted investing in something that you're a bit on the fence of, and actually, the warning signs were there, but you went ahead and you shouldn't have?
Yes. And it's always about people. If you can see that the person is there's such a fine line between grit and obstinance. And you need investors. We're looking for people that are coachable. And when I say coachable, I don't mean I tell you something, you turn around and do exactly what I said. That's actually a red flag. I don't know everything, and I could be wrong. I've been wrong heaps in the past, and I'm sure I'll be wrong heaps more. What I want to see is that you seek advice, thoughts, sounding board from me and other people, and then you synthesize that information and take it away and do something powerful with it. If you have somebody that refuses to listen to anybody else and what they know is right, there's a 0.1% chance that they are right and that they should have ignored everybody and just done their big crazy vision because they were right. 99.9% of the time, they are wrong. And so I rarely take that bet that blinkered person is right, and more look for people that will go out and test ideas, take on feedback, synthesize it, and evolve their thinking. So I call it, like tightly held conviction, or sorry, high conviction, loosely held. So like you have conviction in it until you learn more things, and then you will evolve to a new point of conviction.
That's good.
Laura, with the cohort that you've been working with, what sort of percentage are from STEM background?
I think the current cohort is about 40% have at least a master's degree. Now, whether that's STEM or not, I don't think we've cut the data that way. But what we end up with is a lot of folks that degree in STEM or not, their expertise is there. And so one of the interesting companies, SyncTech. So she was in the construction industry and very much involved in kind of digital twin technology and emerging digital technologies for the construction sector. She's the CEO of the company, and she partnered up with somebody who had experience in construction tech, but very much from the kind of business point of view. And she finds it so frustrating that when she's talking to customers, they insist on having her co-founder present so that they can talk about the technical stuff. And she's like, no, I'm here to talk to you about the technical stuff. Please don't assume that my male co-founder is the technical one. And so we do have that, even though I don't believe she has an advanced degree in that. So it's a mix of degrees and just work experience that they've gained that skill set.
So what sort of numbers are those with PhD?
We have a deck with that somewhere. I think about 30% of our founders have a PhD.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's actually higher than I was expecting, I think, given the master's amount.
And how many people in the one cohort?
So we've just changed our cohort structures. Previously, we would take between 80 to 110 people per cohort. And we did those cohorts twice a year. We've just moved to 3 times a year, and we'll probably drop the cohort size to like 50 to 70. We're just kind of experimenting a little bit on that front, making the relationships a bit more navigable, and then also providing better support for, okay, so your perfect match wasn't in the cohort, which statistically speaking, that's going to happen from time to time. How do we help you look externally to the cohort to attract somebody into your opportunity? And there's probably 5 investments we make per cohort that have an externally sourced founder, where we've kind of enabled that. In the most recent cohort, she's basically making an Airbnb for location scouting, focused on like the creator economy. Like, they need locations just like high dollar productions need, but they don't have the resources to locate or pay for the location scouting services. So she wanted to build that, and she was looking for somebody with a specific background in, kind of like ex-Airbnb type person, and didn't find that in the cohort, and helped her make a LinkedIn video that she put out, and she had to take it down 48 hours later because she had 100 high quality applications. She spent the next week in back-to-back interviews with folks and landed an amazing co-founder.
Wow. So what's the competition? How many people typically apply in the one program?
Yeah, so the application rate is quite high. So we get anywhere between kind of 800 and 2,500 applications. And I think COVID has really shifted the application trends, but yeah, 800 to 2,500 per cohort, and we take between 70 and 110 depending on the type of cohort that we're running, so that's already a pretty high bar.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, so what it looks like to get in is like culture. Like Antler make people first decisions. We will invest in a business that we do not have high conviction on the product or the market, but we love the team to figure it out, where a lot of investors won't do that. And we, when we're making investment decisions, we do actually sit down and say, if we're on the fence about those two things, but we have the high conviction, we will always like lean towards that. So we discuss it and say, yep, we're solid on the team, and so we'll make this bet and figure the rest out later.
Wow. Now, for those who want to be involved in a startup but don't have an idea,
demonstrate that you know how to think entrepreneurially in your application. So if you've participated in hackathons, if you have had any side hustle on in the past, just something to show that interest towards entrepreneurship. But at the end of the day, it's going to come down to skill. So either you've worked in an industry and have a unique domain knowledge that could be useful to pair up, or you've got strong skills that could be broadly applicable within the cohort. And I can absolutely assure you that full stack engineers rarely are left dangling.
So, sorry?
No, go ahead, Fiona.
Yeah, thank you. So this is the pre-launch program, right? I just wanted to ask, like, how does it work? So if you get in, do you have networking sessions to meet with people?
Yeah, so basically the way that it works, and we're well used to running virtual ones, is for the first kind of 2 or 3 weeks, we ask everybody to set their idea aside so that we're on an even playing field, especially for ones that kind of didn't come in with a fully baked idea of what they wanted to do. And it's just focused on getting to know each other. We do these different design sprints, which is kind of like a super condensed hackathon, where we don't expect anything to come out of the design sprints. It's more about creating an environment for you to think and work together with other folks. And so we do a couple of ones that we organize, and then a lot of the participants organize their own amongst themselves. And sometimes they'll organize them kind of focused on an idea that they were kind of thinking about maybe. And then if people come into that design sprint and like it, then you kind of go through a process of figuring out if you want to work together. Once you get to the point of thinking like, actually, I think I might want to work with these folks, we have a process called 50 founder questions, where you have to go and have this intense conversation about work style and where are your passions, what's your vision, what motivates you, and really get to the bottom of do we have that kind of deep-seated alignment to make a good pairing that will be able to go the distance. And then from there, we have opportunities, what we call track out. So that like, okay, we want to work together. Now, sometimes people track out and then it's like, actually, we misjudged that. and so they kind of break up and come back into the main pool. So you kind of have this kind of out in over the period of weeks. And then it goes to the point of investment. We just did pre-IC. So IC is investment committee. And so this is like pre-IC, so they got to pitch ideas and get feedback before it's like actually go time. And we had 43 opportunities pitch at pre-IC, and I think we'll end up with about 20 to 25 pitch at investment committee. And we invest in as many meet our investment criteria. On average, that's been between 13 to 18 companies out of each cohort.
Okay, that's quite a lot.
Yes, yes, it is.
Sorry, I don't know what your name is, but the person who says Fleet Center.
Oh, that's Tick Lamb, by the way.
Tick Lamb?
Yes.
Okay, I think you said you were going to put the recording up. Do you have to be a Fleet member to see it?
If Laura doesn't mind me sharing this publicly, then I can put that on our YouTube channel.
Yeah, that's fine.
Awesome.
Right, okay, cool. So I just wanted to ask, what do you have to do to be a Fleet member?
I can have that conversation separately, but quickly,
Okay.
you just need to do a program with Fleet. So if you're doing your PhD, are you doing your PhD at the moment?
No, I'm actually in my first year. I'm doing a bachelor's degree.
I'll reach out to you. I'll email you.
Yeah, okay. Maybe you can send me a message on LinkedIn.
Sure.
I'll drop my link there.
Okay.
And anyone just feel free to add me. Okay, I have to go now. Thank you, Laura, for the talk. It was really informative.
No worries.
Okay, see ya.
Thank you, Laura. Matt, have you got any further questions?
Trying to think of a few things, but it's been a great talk, Laura. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no worries.
Very helpful. Much, Laura.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.